Venezuela reignites a long-standing border dispute. The prize? A resources-rich swath of neighboring Guyana. On Sunday, Venezuelans backed their president's call to claim it. Some worry it's a short step from referendum to annexation. Now, the territory of Essequibo has long been ruled by Guyana, but Venezuela says it's theirs. Ellen Morrow breaks down how they got here and why now.
Venezuela just voted yes in a referendum to take over a huge chunk of land from its neighbor, Guyana, in a dispute that's been going on for more than a century.
We are working around the clock to ensure that our borders remain intact and the people in our country remains safe.
Tensions are high. There are even fears of a military confrontation. So how did we get here? This is Essequibo, recognized by the international community as part of Guyana, making up 2/3 of that country's territory. But Venezuela claims it's actually the rightful owner. Essequibo is bigger in size than England or Greece, mainly thick jungle, but also home to about 125,000 people. Essequibo is also rich in resources. In 2015, massive oil reserves were found just offshore, intensifying the standoff. Venezuela argues that Essequibo was part of it under Spanish colonial rule, but the territory was also claimed by the British, who ruled Guyana. An international tribunal in 1899 decided in British Guyana's favor, but Venezuela called that decision fraudulent. In 2018, Guyana asked the International Court of Justice to settle the matter once and for all. But that decision is still likely years away. Enter Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, campaigning hard ahead of the referendum.
Nosotros estamos resolviendo por la vía constitucional, pacífica y democrática, un despojo imperial de 150 años.
Maduro is under pressure. Years of economic and political crises, food and medicine shortages have made life in Venezuela very difficult. Presidential elections are set for next year. If they're free and fair, like the international community is demanding, analysts argue Maduro would likely lose power. Stirring up a geopolitical crisis, they say, may be his way of trying to hold on. And any attempt at actually annexing Essequibo, experts say, would be too risky. Guyana has hosted American soldiers helping to train its military. The country's president was at a flag raising over the Essequibo jungle ahead of Venezuela's vote, urging Venezuela to stay away. Neighboring Brazil has sent troops to its borders with Venezuela and Guyana, trying to deter any escalation. It's unclear what Venezuela's next steps will be. But the International Court of Justice ordered it not to do anything that would further upset the status quo.
The Guyanese president, therefore, is calling on Venezuela to respect the process of the International Court of Justice as it reviews the land dispute matter. Just last week, the court ordered Venezuela not to take any action that would alter Guyana's control over the territory. You see it highlighted there on your screen.
So joining us now is Guyanese President Mohammed Irfaan Ali. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. President. So here we have a situation where Venezuela has long disputed this border, right? And it is currently being looked at by international courts. On the flip side, we know it's an oil-rich region. We know that Nicolás Maduro is facing an election in the coming year, and Venezuela is in the middle of an economic collapse. What do you believe is behind this uptick in this dispute?
Well, first of all, I want to make it very clear that the borders were settled in 1899. Venezuela and then British Guyana participated fully in the settlement of this border. They both agreed on the border. The border was then enacted in Venezuela, local laws, and also stamps were produced with the borders as it exists today. When we were about to get independence, Venezuela raised a controversy and the Geneva Agreement was entered into. In that agreement, It provided that if the controversy could not have been settled between the parties, then the United Nations Secretary General would determine the mechanism to settle that. And the mechanism that was determined by the United Nations Secretary General was the ICJ. And that is where we believe this matter must be settled. But as you rightfully said, Venezuela is faced with many challenges, political challenges, democratic challenges, and challenges within its society itself. But we are taking this very seriously because of the narrative that is coming out of Venezuela, the threat that comes out of Venezuela. And recently, Venezuela opened defiance of the International Court of Justice when the leaders there basically said they will not adhere to the orders of the ICJ. Now, this is an important issue for us in this region because we want this region to remain a zone of peace. We want this is an important part of the Western Hemisphere.
Well, Mr. President,
cannot have
apologies for the interruption, but on your point, considering that Venezuela really isn't recognizing the ICJ, you're saying let it settle the dispute. You could see a situation where Venezuela goes ahead and tries to interfere in your efforts to open up leasing contracts for oil companies, oil discovered there back in 2015. This could escalate. What nations have voiced support for you, and what are you willing to do to defend what you say is your territory?
We have had the OAS in full support of us, the Commonwealth group of countries in full support of us. We have had CARICOM leaders CARICOM issuing strong statements, and we have had various leaders across the globe. I've been reaching out because our first line of defense is diplomacy, and we've been reaching out to leaders. The U.S. is strong support of Guyana, and also countries, India. We have raised this with India. We have even raised this with Cuba, countries that have a very close relationship with Venezuela, so that they can encourage Venezuela to do what is right and to ensure that they do not act in a reckless or adventurous manner that can disrupt the peace within the zone. But we are also preparing for the worst case scenario. We are preparing with our allies, with our friends, to ensure that we are in a position to defend what is ours, the Essequibo.
So, Mr. President, just to piggyback off of Errol's question, what does that mean? What does that mean, putting yourself in a position to defend your borders?
It means doing the work in educating the world. It means informing all the relevant authorities and agencies of what is happening. It means constant monitoring and observation of what Venezuela is doing. It means ensuring that our diplomatic work is at its highest level because we want this to be resolved in a peaceful manner. We are doing everything, first of all, to ensure that the zone remain a zone of peace, and to encourage Venezuela to do what is right and to abide by international norms and international law.
Well, Mr. President, we want to emphasize that point that you want to see a peaceful resolution to this. We all know people from Guyana and Venezuela and want to see this region of the world remain peaceful. We appreciate you joining us on News Today to discuss this important issue. Mr. President Mohammed Irfaan Ali, thank you for your time.
So, Ellen, a yes vote. Now what?
Well, that's the big question here. The International Court of Justice said that it appears Venezuela is taking steps with the aim of trying to take over control, including plans to build an airstrip nearby. But Venezuela knows the international community is watching, and it wants more sanctions relief. So taking further action over Essequibo would not necessarily be the way to get that sanctions relief. But in the meantime, without clarity, this just means a lot of anxiety for the residents of Essequibo.
All right, Ellen Morrow, thank you.
You're welcome.